We have an incredible lineup of speakers today. They have innovated in various fields, from food to healthcare to AI. They have led leadership roles at prestigious institutions like MIT and Google. They published books, papers, patents, but most importantly, they chose to become entrepreneurs. So my first question is, to all of you, can each of you share the story of what motivated you to become an entrepreneur? Were there any pivotal moments or people that influenced your decision? And maybe we'll start with you, Sami.
I want to start by saying I didn't know what an entrepreneur was. I mean, I went to college in the 90s. There was no internet. And my father was a business owner. But I came here and I didn't know what entrepreneurship was. I had an aspiration to start my own thing. And when I came to MIT, I was an undergrad. I think it's kind of this Middle Eastern thing. I always had a side hustle. I always wanted to do things outside of my core academics. And graduated, I had this clear idea that I wanted to work at a great place. And at the time, I worked at Lotus, which was one of the premier software companies of the time, and learned the business. But as soon as I kind of got to the point where I had some financial independence to be able to do, I pretty much resigned and started my first company, which I ended up selling to Google. But the key moment for me was, this is, again, early days of the internet. Investing was unclear. I didn't know what Series A was. I didn't know what an investor pitch was. And it was really important at the time. I ended up connecting with a colleague of mine who was older, more experienced, and it was kind of an important moment for me to work with at the time, this gentleman, Massih, who pretty much taught me how to be an entrepreneur in America.
I think for me, I just didn't want to cook under somebody else. I just wanted to cook my own food. And I think, moving to New York, I realized there wasn't that many Lebanese restaurants when I first moved there. I moved there about 10 years ago now, and one of the only restaurants was Alili. So I went and staged there, and then I worked at different restaurants, and then I just realized there was no other Lebanese spots, and I was like, we got to change this. So at first I started catering before opening up the grocer, but for me, I just really wanted to cook on my own, and I didn't want anyone to tell me what to do in the kitchen. So that was one of the reasons. I also felt like I didn't know what an entrepreneur was at the time. I just wanted to do my own thing. I knew that, but I didn't know what that meant. And I think I've always been a big Oprah fan throughout my whole life, and I always watched her, and I always saw her success, and I always looked at her, and I didn't realize, like, she's an entrepreneur as well. She's got so many different outlets that she's done, so I felt like I looked up to her, but also outside of that, looked up to other small business owners. I think being in Brooklyn and being in New York, it's such a melting pot with so many different places and nationalities, and wanting to be your own and sticking up for it and showing what your real food is in our culture. That was what I really wanted to do.
For me, I wanted to be able to have positive impact on the world through my work. And the way I like to do this is by inventing new technologies and then translating them to first-of-their-kind products that can solve real-world problems. Of course, there's many different ways of having impact through technologies, and I love the full cycle, from the conception to the scale. My story started when I came here to MIT as a graduate student. I had a crazy idea. I spoke to my advisor, and the idea was that I wanted to be able to use Wi-Fi not for communication, but to be able to see through walls and track people. Like, for example, take my phone, pointing at a wall, and use the Wi-Fi signals to see on my screen what is happening behind the wall. Clearly, you could see that I like these types of crazy ideas, and I pursued it. We developed the technology. People did not believe us that it worked. So that was a challenge, because then we went ahead and built it, and we invited people to try it for themselves. Then we started thinking about what applications we can solve with it. And that's actually what led us to get an invitation from the White House when we went and demoed to President Obama. And then I wanted to see how we can use this to solve real-world problems. And so we spun off a company that is currently solving problems in the context of healthcare. So it always boils down to how can I create positive impact, both from the inception and envisioning new technologies to scaling them to real-world products. And that's what motivated me to be an entrepreneur.
Awesome. So yeah, we heard things like not wanting to work for someone else, impact, financial independence. So let's move to defining success. So you guys achieved a lot, received a lot of recognition. Eddie, as we heard, you are 30 under 30 in food and drink. You're publishing a book that I see on the table right there.
It just arrived 2 days ago, so I had to bring it. I've been waiting for it for a long time.
I just ordered it.
Thank you.
That's awesome. Fadel, we heard you're a professor here at MIT, received a lot of awards, invented a lot of stuff. Sami as well, over 50 patents, Google, and then 4 startups. So after all of this, how do you guys define success as an entrepreneur, and has your definition evolved over time? Maybe we'll start with you, Eddie.
I think to me, I'm so hard on myself, and I think as a culture, we're very hard on ourselves. So I think for me, it's hard to say what success really is. And I think, setting goals for yourself and keep striving to keep doing better, I think that's kind of success for me at all times. And I think for me, I keep growing. Opening up the grocer was successful, but then making it on 30 under 30 was successful. And then the cookbook coming out is successful. And it's like, what's the next step? And I feel like that's how I always look at it. And I think when I achieve something, that's when I feel the success.
Awesome. Fadel?
There's different ways of defining success. Success in general versus success as an entrepreneur. And let me start with, on a personal level, there's both intrinsic and extrinsic ways of thinking about success. For me, it's always about how can I set a sufficiently exciting goal that is almost impossible for me to achieve, and then going ahead and achieving that goal. And then beyond that, setting a goal that is after it, and then going ahead and achieving that one by one. And this broad definition of success I followed it along the way. Like when I was an undergrad, I wanted to go to MIT for grad school. When I was in grad school, I wanted to publish a paper in the top venues. Now what I want to do is to build a very successful startup. In the context of entrepreneurship specifically, it's also a set of goals that you're putting for yourselves. And for me, these goals are always based on 3 main things: the team that I'm building, the product that we're delivering, and the value that we are creating. And at every step along the way, we try to raise the bar and together be able to achieve those. So it also goes back to a lot of what Eddie's saying. It's like setting these exciting, ambitious goals that are almost impossible and then going and achieving them.
Great. Sami, what do you think?
For me, the definition of success changed over time. And this is, I think you see this as a theme, all 3 of us, is you start with kind of a view of the world. And in college, it was getting good grades. It is doing a whole bunch. Then at work, it's about building great products, inventing things. And it starts to evolve over time. And I would say I started off thinking success was one thing. And then 4 startups later, 2 large companies later, I think of it in a very different way now. And I think for me, it was building on, your definition of success evolves by learning from what you had done in the past. My first startup was really, let's try to get an exit and let's have impact. And then I went to Google. And Google just taught me another level of ambition. I had ambition, but I didn't have Google level ambition. You're like, okay, how do you actually build products that touch 1 billion users? And you're like, 1 billion users? That's a crazy number, but I was able to do that. I pretty much was involved. At the time, I got to a point where the CEO was asking me and the team to kind of reimagine news. This was at the time when the news industry was really going hard after Google over filter bubbles, fake news, all those issues. So pretty much led kind of like a rewrite of the product, which was driven by understanding what users want. And at its core, it's like, go out there and solve a real problem in the world that impacts a lot of people. And now for me, it's fundamentally like success is not about money. It's more about like how, like there's an opportunity to change something significant in the world, and you can imagine a new future. And my current company is really about reimagining business in this age of AI. And I fundamentally believe we're on a path to reimagine how business operates. It's probably one of the largest revolutions. And when I think about that, that's the level of impact and ambition I think about. And then the second part is, and this is more on a personal level, like you can create value in the world, but at the end of the day, you also want to create an environment where as you're building this stuff, it's actually a pleasant environment. And one of the things I tell my team constantly is it's not just about it's the journey. It's like we want to create a culture that's very, very special. I want to come here and do my best work. And that means you have to actually fundamentally invest in not just the outcomes, but the culture by which outcomes are generated.
So impact seems very important from all of you, and we'll come back to that. But before that, I want to talk about the other part of the equation. Everyone knows that entrepreneurship has ups and downs. So we talked about the success. Let's talk a little bit about the downs. So tell us about a challenge or failure that you faced on your entrepreneurial journey and how you overcame it. Maybe Fadel, you can get us started.
Yeah, of course, there's many setbacks along the way in the journey. I talked about the first startup that I was involved in. I'd say a second thing that I did that was entrepreneurial was building my lab at MIT. When I joined as a professor, one of the expectations was that I would build a group. And this has a lot of similarities to building a startup. You need to hire people, you need to raise money, you need to create some output and some value. And for me, the thing that I failed on in the beginning and did not know is how to hire the right team. And I just did not know that. Like, hiring the right team and building the right culture is one of the hardest things that I've learned. I did not know how to hire people. How do you mentor them? How do you create the right culture? How do you fire people? Like, all of these are important things that were very difficult. And I realized, going back to something that Sami was just saying, there was a time where I would go to my every day to work, and I'm not happy. And they're not happy, honestly. And it's because we were not able to build the right team and the right culture. And so I took a step back and I thought about what are the things that I need to do better. And I started reading about team and culture and management and mentorship. And I experimented a lot, and it changed my style a lot in what I was doing. And so now in the startup that I'm currently doing, the new one, because I've had all of that knowledge and learned from it, it's been so smooth, and I feel so excited every day that I go. And people feel also very excited to come because I learned the lesson of how do you build the right team and create the right culture.
So how do you think, so let's follow up on that specifically. So, when you start a company, you're doing a lot of things for the first time, and you haven't, do you have to make those mistakes yourself to learn, or is there a way that you would recommend? Are there mentors? How would you deal with that for other situations to avoid having to do the mistake yourself? Maybe, Sami, you have a lot of experience.
Yes, so, just challenges I've had. One of the things when you're trying to build a company, and if I would kind of look back at the journey, early in my career, it was all about cool technology, and this thing's going to be mind-bending, paradigm shifting. This is going to change all this stuff. And then, as you progress through time, one thing that really emerges is solve a real human problem in the world. The tech is cool, but it actually needs to solve a problem for it to actually create any kind of commercial value. And one of the things about that is, Fadel said, there's a lot about the cultures, et cetera, to kind of create that overall environment. But one of the things I would say around learning is being open to learning. Something I was actually pleasantly surprised after coming from the Middle East, spending time at MIT, and kind of experiencing professional life in the United States is people, and this was very surprising to me. When I first worked at Lotus, the CEO wanted to mentor me, and I'm like, I'm just like a new grad who's starting their career, but then like I was doing good work, but the CEO was seeking to mentor. And it was kind of, for me, it was eye-opening that it's not all on you. And magic happens when you surround yourselves by people who are more experienced, smarter than yourselves, and you need to seek them. And it's something I've been fortunate, in building many companies and being in different environments, that I actually also now seek people because it happened to me. And this virtuous cycle is what makes people kind of evolve and better, because we're kind of, when you're at the forefront of technology or building new things, there's a lot of unknowns. I mean, even just outside of just the technology. I mean, when COVID happened, we're all now building remote-first companies for the very first time. We didn't even know what that meant or how that worked, and how do you build a culture over Zoom? I mean, all these issues were real. So seeking out people who have had remote-first companies prior to COVID is like, what works, what doesn't, et cetera, and is kind of core. So navigating these ups and downs, it's important to seek advice and be humbled. Like, there's stuff you don't know and there's stuff you know. And the stuff you don't know, there's a lot of people out there that may know it, and there's all sorts of ways to incentivize them to help you, but seek mentors.
How about you, Eddie, in the food space?
I have three different things to say. One, to go off what you're saying. I mean, when I opened up the grocer, I was 25 years old. I did not know how to work with people. I had a catering business before for 4 years, and I was working in a basement in Brooklyn by myself. And so to start actually having to mentor a team and have a team was crazy to me. Like, I have 16 employees now. So to be able to hire people and you're like younger than them, but you're telling them what to do, the age thing was getting to me. And so that took a long time. And I went to business coaching. I started taking business coaching once a week, and that helped me really realize building a community within the store, within ourselves, and being a mentor to everybody, and how to have those talks, how to fire people, how to hire people, how to understand what they're looking for. And in a food space, you want to teach them the right ways to do things, and you want everybody to have good hygiene and, to take care of themselves outside of work, because you don't want them to get sick. So there's so many of these things where you want to have a good, foundation for them. And when they're at work, you want them to, be able to taste things and eat things and not just, eat behind your back. Those things were kind of getting to me as well. And then what you're saying, for me, I felt like I went to other restaurant owners and I, took them out to coffee or invited them over and sat with them and asked them all the questions that I wanted to know. Like, how do you do this? How do you do that? There were so many questions. In New York, there's so many regulations and so many rules, and you can't cut corners because they'll find out. So there's so many different things that I needed to learn before opening up, but also from day to day. So I thought, there's people out there that want to help each other out, and there's a community, in each, in the food industry, there's a community, but I know there's communities within all different genres of work.
Awesome. So mentorship is very important.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and volunteer all the panelists to become mentors for anyone in the audience who's interested.
Yeah. If you're an MIT student, join the MIT Sandbox. World-class mentors are helping students on a fairly regular basis. And this is actually, just to build on that, a lot of university programs, that's not just unique to MIT, have kind of created these environments where students can connect with alumni who are very distinguished in many cases and offer mentorship for pretty much just as a volunteer exercise. So do take advantage of these new programs now that entrepreneurship has become a much more prevalent thing on university campuses.
Okay, and I want to follow up on something. You mentioned COVID, Sami, early. So more broadly, how do you look at the macro environment? COVID a few years ago, now there's a AI hype. So how do you marry your interests and ideas with what's happening in the macro environment, and how do you take advantage of that? Can you go against the wave, or did you consider that in your entrepreneurial journeys?
Absolutely. One of the things, actually, one of my mentors at Google, one of the former founders of Excite told me being early is the same as being wrong, and being late is also the same as being wrong. So timing is really, really important, and being kind of aware of what problem you're trying to solve, and are people ready to solve it. At a macroeconomic level, I mean, for the first time we're hearing, I mean, there's a tremendous pressure in the capital markets to increase revenues, but more importantly, to increase margins, profits. And that's actually permeating not just in the capital markets, it's actually starting to seep through into the private markets, into the venture markets. And for example, we're a Series A startup. For the first time, I'm being asked, when are you going to be profitable? This was never a thing. And as a result, it's creating all sorts of pressure. The second thing is ChatGPT happened. It was a significant step function in AI capabilities. I mean, I've been doing AI for many, many years. This was like a step function. We are doing things that weren't even possible, weren't even imaginable. So there is tremendous opportunity to kind of solve a new type of problem in the world, because now AI is in a place where it's actually passing the Turing test. For the non-engineers, the Turing test is like you engage with an AI and you don't know if it's human or not. And as a result, it's now possible to do very, very interesting new kinds of use cases. So that's kind of like the second thing that's happened in the world. It's a trend. It's like, and public companies, private companies, everyone's asking, what's your AI strategy? AI is becoming a thing that everyone's thinking about, and there's some really, really obvious use cases. However, one of the things that this new technology has really challenged is it actually broke software economics. One of the things a lot of investors, a lot of people love to do software. Software is awesome because it is, you build the thing once, 1 million users, 100 million users, 1 billion users, your cost structure is fairly constant. And now you have this thing that's like stupid expensive. And as a result, you need to understand, I mean, the long dialogue here is like, there's this really complicated set of events. One, if you're trying to solve a problem in this world, you need to understand the macroclimate, you need to understand the microclimate, you need to understand the unit economics, and you need to put them together and solve a real problem that people really have. And being early is wrong, being late is wrong, the time is now, and this AI stuff is real.
Yeah, absolutely. So why now is a very important question to answer when you're starting your company. Fadel, since we're talking about tech, how did that influence what topics you choose to work on and what companies to start?
It doesn't. I actually don't like trends because there's like a lot of people doing a lot of things, and I'm thinking about how can I uniquely contribute to the world. Personally, if I feel that someone else is going to come and be able to solve that problem, why am I trying to go on to solve that problem? I don't like the race. I want to be able to create unique value. It does not mean that I am blind to it. Yes, we will look at new AI tools. For example, we use GitHub Copilot. You know, there are new tools that are being developed. Yes, we will leverage them. But I'm not going to feel that, oh my God, there's this thing. How can I contribute to it? Because trends come and go. And like I remember when I started my my graduate school, big data was the big thing. Then some cryptocurrency. There's always this new thing that is going to be exciting, but it's like, okay, and the question is, how can I help? How can I use it to help me on my mission? And the same thing also applies to like even fundraising. I remember 3 years ago, people were like, raise money because you can get great valuations. I'm like, I don't need money though for my startup. Why do I want to raise money? People are like, now raise money. I'm like, we're cash flow positive. Why do we need, I mean, there's these things when it comes to trends, I start questioning things more. The why becomes an even bigger problem. So I question more when there is a trend rather than I try to follow it. And then I try to use what in it we can use for advancing our goals.
Okay, great. Different perspective. I guess both can lead to different kinds of products. Some are longer term, shorter term kind of entrepreneurship ventures. How about you, Eddie? In the food space, our relationship with restaurants changed a lot in the last few years.
Yes.
Can you tell us how that impacted you and how you thought about that?
Yeah, so I mean, I owned a catering company and then had to close that. And then I was trying to figure out what to do, and that's how I came up with The Grocer, because in North Brooklyn, there was no Middle Eastern grocery stores, and Sahadi's is in downtown Brooklyn, so that was kind of far away. So when I was cooking at home during COVID, I ran out of ingredients that I needed, and I couldn't buy them anywhere around, and that's how I came up with the idea. So, and that was kind of the start, and we started as a grocer, and we had a to-go window, and everything was to go. Then we started doing sit-down inside, and now we're doing dinner service, and we're evolving, but that's what happens, is things evolve as time goes. And with COVID, I mean, not only did things change, but now people are cooking more at home. And so I felt like the grocer aspect of things really was good to do at the time. And I think outside of that also, food is now like trending everywhere. You know, there's the hot restaurants, there's the food trends on social media. There's so many different things that you have to like look at and see how can I be part of that in a way? Because people run after trendy food or like trendy spots. They want to take a picture and post it. And so that kind of all goes together.
So let's talk about some Arab-specific insights. So we have an audience of Arab Americans, obviously. What did it mean to be of Arab descent in your story? Did that raise any challenges, or was it actually a competitive advantage in some respect? Sami?
Yes and no. I mean, I'll give you a few anecdotes. I mean, that actually are outside of. I mean, there was this interview with one of the soccer coaches. And I was asking, why does Argentinian soccer? Why does Argentina produce so many great soccer players? And his theory was it's the environment. Where these folks grow in areas where there's tremendous challenges, they have to be very aware of their environment, and that makes them into great soccer players. And I grew up in Kuwait and Jordan, and came to university first time to America, and you learn to create stuff out of very little. And you grow up with the hustle. Something I tell my son is like, you need to have the eye of the tiger to want to do stuff. And that's kind of like part of growing up. What some of the environment helps you have a tremendous amount of perseverance, and you won't take no one for an answer. And I mean, I remember one of my coaches at Google's like, you don't seem to know how to get through the front door. You can always find the side door to kind of get whatever you need, because there's just a lot of bureaucracy, et cetera. And that's some of the good. Kind of the coming from Argentina. Some of the challenges is that there's other. I mean, one was actually this is kind of somewhat of a negative story. When I published one of my first blog posts at Google when we relaunched Google News, etc. I used to get comments. It's like, you didn't change your name, and I'm like, what are you talking about? And so there's like those are real challenges, is that like there is stigma with, and people have an expectation that like typically Arab names can you can run into issues, but that's one side of it. And then the last one is there's stuff that you're just not aware of. I mean, we talked about mentorship. I didn't grow up with mentorship being a thing, and it wasn't a thing you were seeking, and it was something I learned from the corporate environment here. So there's just kind of three different perspectives, ranging from like, we're really good at the hustle, and our environment drives that, and those other kind of perspectives that come with some. But at the end of the day, have impact. There's a lot of opportunity, and just dream big. You can actually have impact.
How about you, Eddie? How was your experience?
Well, I moved to Boston in 2004, and I didn't speak a lick of English, but we've come a long way now. I don't shut up. But I think for me, you know, being Arab was big because I wanted, you know, when I moved here, no one knew what hummus was. Like, no one knew what hummus was anywhere, or labneh or anything like that. And now, you know, Costco's making labneh, which I just heard about last week. I was like, what? So I think for me, it's an advantage in a way that it's food that people don't know about and they're excited to try. But I think, like when I moved here, people would be like, what is that? I don't want to try that. Where now people are wanting to try things and are growing out of their shell in that sense. And so I'm here to like show you new things. But also being Arab is a little disadvantaged in a way of when people come in, especially Lebanese people or Arab people, they'll come in and be like, well, that's not how my grandmother makes it, or that's not how I make it. And I'm like, well, I'm not your grandmother. Your grandmother's name is not outside, and this is not her place, and this is how I make it. Or, we make our tabbouleh with kale, not parsley, because it lasts longer, and I don't have the money to pay somebody all day to chop parsley. And so, and people come in and they're so angry. Why are you making tabbouleh with kale? And I'm like, well, why don't you run the business? Like, let me see you chop the parsley all day. So I would say that's the one disadvantage. But I think overall, growing up in Lebanon, there's no electricity half the day. Your grandmother's worried about running the washer while she's cooking something. There's all these disadvantages growing up there. So when you move here, you feel like, wow, now I can do all this stuff. Especially in the kitchen, you get to do so much more. And so I think, there's a bit of both.
Great. Fadel?
I don't think on average there has been a major advantage or disadvantage. I don't feel that I came here and I was treated better or worse. I grew up in Lebanon, so we had to figure out how, like between electricity being out, like you're trying to figure out like how you can get things done in a short amount of time. You learn to be a little bit more efficient, but you also like suffer from PTSD growing up in wars. I think about it in a little bit of a different way. I think more about my responsibility as someone of Arab heritage. Like I am in many of these environments and I'm looking around and I actually I don't see, for example, others. And so I try to make it a point to tell them, I'm Lebanese, I'm Arab, this is who I am, because otherwise they might not realize. So for me, it's more of a way of showing more representation for my background. I'd say the other disadvantage, which all of us face, is that we're always worried about things going back home, and it pains us. And we're thinking about how can we help things, how can we make things right. And it's a struggle that all of us have, I'm sure. And in that sense, it's a disadvantage. But the way we can do that is by being successful, making an impact, because the more we can maximize our impact and visibility, the more we can give for back home. So that is my ties to my Arab heritage here.
Awesome, and that's a great segue to my next question on social impact. So we talked a lot about impact throughout the previous questions. So, but more specifically, what impact matters to you? Impact can be economic, cultural, environmental. There are a lot of ways to have an impact. So what matters to you, each of you specifically, and how do you measure that and have goals? Eddie?
I think for me, impact is really, I always say this, I'm just trying to spread the love of Lebanese food and the joy of Lebanese food. And so I think the impact is teaching people what our food is. And I think, growing up here, you look at CNN, you look at all these different outlets, and, it makes the Middle East always look so bad. And I think food is the way to make it look beautiful. And that is our culture. That is what we do. We sit around a table, we eat the meza, we really come together, and we care about food, and we care about having a meal together. Like I moved here, and I was stunned that people went home and ate at different times watching TV. I'm like, what? You guys don't sit together? And that was crazy to me, my mom instilled in us every day, everyone comes home, we sit together and we have a meal together. And I think that is so big and that's impactful. And so I kind of like to do that. And I was telling somebody this yesterday. So during events, when I started doing catering, everybody does the hors d'oeuvres, passing hors d'oeuvres, and there's no sense of community or food. You're just eating and very fast. And so I started doing these things called brown paper board, which is a big grazing table, and that's my way of putting food on a big table and everybody comes around and grabs food from there, but they're talking to each other and they're like, have you tried this? Have you tried that? And it brings community around food, even at an event, even at a fancy event or whatever. People come together, even if they don't know each other, they're getting to talk about the food or getting to meet each other. And I feel like that is impactful. And outside of that, I haven't been able to do this as much, but I would love to spend more time in Lebanon trying to, go to different farms and meeting people there. And my hope and dream one day is to make a line of, rose water, olive oil, all that stuff that I could import here, but work with really good farmers there.
Awesome. How about you, Fadel? How do you quantify and measure impact?
There's two dimensions with which I like to have positive impact. One is through my work, and one's outside my work, through my network. When it comes to work, when I'm inventing a new technology, I'm thinking about, okay, what is this crazy thing that I can do? But then when we want to translate it to solve real-world problems, that's when we think a lot about impact. Like my first startup is in the context, we started with the goal of having Superman's ability to see through walls, and then we transitioned it to a company that is accelerating drug discovery for patients with Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis. The same thing in my lab, like we started developing these new IoT technologies, and we're trying to use them to understand and address problems with oceans and climate change. So that's through the work, but then there's the other kind of impact that we can have as we become more influential through our networks. For example, when COVID happened, people here at MIT had developed like these low-cost ventilators. And someone reached out to me in Lebanon and was like, how can we get access to these? And just simply making these connections, being able to, I was not the one who developed them, but I was the connection between the people who developed them here and being able to create very quickly a few dozens of low-cost ventilators that could help save people's lives. So this is one of the examples. There's many other examples, some of which we can talk about, some of which we can. But the idea of having impact is both through the work, but also through the network. And that's why it's important to sort of keep progressing so that we can help more.
Okay, a quick follow-up on that with you specifically, Fadel. It seems like you're doing a lot of things, MIT, startups, things outside of work. So how do you prioritize these things? You can have impact on so many things. How do you decide what to work on?
That's a difficult problem. And the way I think of it is at every point in my life, and let's go back to one thing that I was saying in the beginning, is there's something that I'm super passionate and super excited about. And if that is not my priority, I'm not going to be happy. So that takes the priority over many things, and that's why I say no to many other things, because the opportunity cost for me of doing something new is not being able to continue what I'm super excited about. And at the end of the day, it's like there's some opportunity cost for your time. So you're thinking about that, this is also why I think a lot about how can I be uniquely helpful, and am I going to be able to bring a sufficiently different perspective to the table whenever I'm doing something, whether it's through entrepreneurship, whether it's through academia or through social work.
Okay, great. And Sami?
Regarding kind of the social impact, I've been much more inclined about, like right now I have this general theme within my current company is like, we're gonna leave the world a better place than we started. And that kind of permeates throughout the overall culture. So we generally are looking at having positive impact on the world, and in this particular case, reimagining business, but be outside of just kind of the professional. My second company was really about helping spread the message. It's basically a Netflix for Arab indie filmmakers. That's actually one of the largest in the Middle East, called Istikana, and we're just pretty much trying to get our story out. And we've spent a tremendous amount of energy procuring Arab filmmaker indie films and making it available on a platform kind of at a global level. I mean, we had a relationship with kind of Dish Network here that we're actually one of the core channels on that platform for many years. And it was for the first time I was seeing, like, here's a Palestinian documentary, here's a Lebanese film, here's a Moroccan film, here's like actually being displayed in real time. And that's a very powerful, creating platforms to be able to tell our story. So when I think about like how do you do impact, is like let's try to figure out ways to do this at scale. Because one of the things I've learned throughout, like I would say has transitioned in my career as like I thought of the world as like an individual contributor or things I can do. And then you start to build this model, well, how do you apply systems thinking? How do you not solve these problems over and over and create environments where there is scale? And that's actually, I really credit my time at Google as thinking about how do you solve problems at scale without you as an individual having to do everything. So it drives at this concept of like systems thinking, et cetera. So when I try to apply these, try to have impact is like, what things can have scale? Creating a platform. So that was the purpose of the second company. I was involved with a variety of nonprofits, and kind of at an individual level, I'm very fortunate I have wonderful mentors. I also tend to spend a fair amount of time mentoring younger folks on all sorts of facets, whether it's entrepreneurship, which now I know what that means, and kind of life in general. But it's all about, I mean, at the core, it's like thinking, how does one have impact at scale, whether it's professional or not?
Awesome. And just to close, in one sentence, can each of you give one piece of advice to aspiring entrepreneurs? Not something that you find in all the books about entrepreneurship, but something you never knew, but you wish someone told you when you started your journey. Fadel, maybe we start with you.
The one thing that I learned that I wish I was told before is reading much more about culture and building teams. It's the hardest thing, and it's very difficult to get it right. So building teams and building culture. Yeah.
Great. How about you, Eddie?
Time is of essence. I think takes time for things to grow, takes time to come up with new ideas. Everything takes time, and I feel like I'm always rushing myself, so I've learned to really let time play its course.
Okay. Sami?
I learned this later. First-time founders think about product. Second-time founders think about distribution as being kind of a core tenet of building sustainable businesses. You can spend all your time on the product, but getting real market feedback should be kind of part and parcel of the core to how you think about building things that have tremendous impact. And distribution is much, much, much harder than most people think.
Awesome. Well, these were amazing insights. Thank you so much, all three of you, for your time. Let's give a round of applause. Thank you.
All right, everyone. In the interest of time, we will take one question from the audience. I am not going to choose, but I did see his hand in the back go up first, to be fair.
Thank you so much for this incredible panel. It's really insightful and very helpful. There's a lot of young minds in this room, and we're always sort of, as we're approaching our graduation, especially grad students from MIT here and undergrads, we're sort of bombarded with a lot of opportunities to do a lot of things. So how do you prioritize those things, and what is some of the things that you think about or you wish you thought about when you were starting your career? I think those are really important things that we can consider and learn from. Thank you.
I attribute how I view the world today very much to my experiences early on and having great mentors. I mean, one of the things I would say is like, find someone to learn from and learn what good looks like. Not good, great. What great looks like. Because that will empower you to do all sorts of things. I mean, just concrete examples. When I graduated, I didn't know what a product manager was. I didn't know what product market fit was. I didn't know what scale looked like. I didn't know how to run an organization. I didn't know what culture was. There was just so much that was just foreign. I could code. I could build all sorts of really interesting technologies, and I had ideas, and like we were inventing all sorts of stuff. But I attribute the things I learned very early at Lotus, I'm still using today because I just learned what great looks like. And having someone good next to you, and something we typically, when kind of building teams, I was on the Google hiring committee for many years. One of the things that you see over and over when you're reviewing resumes and reviewing is like, oh my God, the first couple of years of people's career, the person they sit next to, they learn a tremendous amount from their habits. So look for a really good mentor and do something clearly you're passionate about. Don't do something that, but that's obvious. But the second is find a good teacher and do your homework on the teacher.
I would say take notes. There's so many things that happen and you do so much, and I think like when you come home, like take notes on what you just did and what you learned from, because I think you forget some things, but then when you go back to them, they're always there. And I think for me, one thing that was really great was writing a business plan, because that kind of set goals for myself, and it helped me put my store together and what I was going to do. And so I thought that was big. But I think taking notes, like whenever I do an event or I do something and I hear some things that I'm like, oh, that's great, I write it down in my notes, and whenever I want to like go back to it, I always read it, or I'm like, oh yeah, I remember writing that down. I think so much information is thrown at us, so kind of taking that time to write notes down and always going back to look at them helps so much when you're starting something.
I relate a lot to that question, but I think even when you start grad school, you relate to it because you're thinking that I'm spending my time on this project. Is this the right project for me to spend time on? And I remember feeling anxious about that, and I used to always be anxious about finishing things quickly. Going back to what Eddie was saying, my mom says, "Basaltak mahrua." I don't know, like for those who don't understand, your onion is burnt.
Yeah.
It just means that you're trying to do things very quickly. So looking back, what I ended up doing is I would do something, and then I would do it well, and I would really invest my time in it. And that's what allows me to focus on it. And then I will learn, like the least that I will get out of it is I will learn how to do something extremely well. And then that allows me to move on to the next stage. So I put something, I dedicate myself to it. And then I move from that. And the challenge is, how do you know you're not dedicating yourself to something that is gonna have some good return? And that's where good mentors come in. So you wanna be able to identify someone who you can trust, or have a set of mentors along the way who can just give you feedback, yes, you are moving in the right direction. And you will need that at different stages of your career, especially as you want to grow and move into new areas, because they allow you to adjust your gradient as you are progressing. So I'd say the main thing is it doesn't matter what you exactly do as long as you do it very well.